Hello and welcome to Cheap and Easy Wargaming, where we keep the hobby fun, fast and affordable. So this is my first video, and in it I'm going to show you how I made some X-Wing starfighters from Star Wars using only things that I already had laying around the house. So they cost me nothing to make, but even if you are starting from scratch, everything I use is super cheap, super easy to come across. So let's go.
So here are the materials that I used. For each X-Wing that you want to make, you're going to need 1 wooden peg, 4 wooden dowels, 4 cocktail sticks, some card. For this I just used some cereal card. You're going to need something to make the base. Here I've used a poker chip, but at the end of the video I'll show you some different options for things depending on what kind of game it is that you want to play. You're going to need something to cut with. Here I've used a hacksaw. If you don't have a hacksaw, then you could still do this with a Stanley blade or something similar. And you're going to need some kind of glue to hold the whole thing together. Here I've used hot glue simply because it's quick and easier to use while I'm making these videos. But also PVA glue will work just as well. So the main body of the X-Wing is going to be made from this wooden peg. The first thing we need to do is just remove the 2 pieces of wood from the spring and place them back to back as such. And you can see already from here that the main body of the X-Wing is already starting to take shape. So I would advise gluing them together at this point and then cutting off the excess piece at the back here. Remember not to glue the piece at the end that you're about to cut off, because you're going to need to keep that separate to use later. So just as an afterthought, it occurred to me that to give a nicer finish to the end result, I would just give a quick sanding to the outside edges of the peg here at the front, just so the paint goes on a bit nicer and it's not such a rough look. I might be cheap and easy, but I do have some standards. If you are using PVA glue, this is going to take a lot longer to dry, but you can get meta and use a second wooden peg to hold the glued wooden peg together until the glue dries. So now that's all glued together, I'm just going to cut off this back portion here. Clearly not the best sawing in the world, but for the purpose of keeping things quick and simple, that's more than good enough. I'm just going to finish off by giving it a quick sand. So we're going to use the 4 wooden dowels to form the engines on the side of the X-Wing as such. So using the grid on the cutting mat here, I'm just going to try and work out what kind of size I want the wings to be, using the cocktail stick as the laser on the end of the wing and then the wooden dowel just to try and get the dimensions right. So I couldn't really decide at this point whether to do the wing 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters long. Looking at the 3 centimeters, I thought that was too long when you add it to the wing on the other side as well, so I decided to bring it into the 2 centimeters. As you'll see at the end of the video, I later regretted that, and next time I might go with maybe 2.5, 3 centimeters. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a straight edge on the card so I've got something to work from. Then line that up on the cutting mat to give me the 2 centimeters I wanted for the wing's width. To keep the fold nice and crisp, I just scored across the card at the 2 centimeter line with a pen. And then, still just using the cutting mat as a guide, I lined up the 1 by 2 centimeter section that I wanted to cut off to form the shape of the wing. Keeping the cutting mat as a guide, just trim off the 2 centimeters at the bottom and then the 1 by 2 section for the wing shape again. And here you can see that the score we just made allows that wing to fold very nicely. So as you can see here, what I did is decided to hot glue the folded wing straight to the side of the ship. But as you'll see at the end of the video, I think the wings are just a little bit too short for the scale, and they give a kind of chibi look to the X-Wing. Glue the wing onto the other side of the ship, and you can use the join between the 2 pegs to make sure you're lining this up properly. Make sure the wings are spread out so they're roughly even. This can be corrected later when you glue the engines on, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Now it's time to glue on the 4 wooden dowels, which are going to form the engines and the boosters. And I tried to place these so that the booster was sticking out just in front of the wing. So just do the same thing for the other 3 engines. And as you can see, it's really starting to take shape now. So I've already cut the end off the 4 cocktail sticks, and that will just give us a straight edge to start measuring from. And it's just a case now of lining up the cocktail stick on the wing in line with the X-wing and kind of eyeballing what I think would be the appropriate length for the lasers. Using the cutting mat as a guide again, I can see I roughly want about 3 centimeters. And then it's just a simple case of, again, just gluing the 4 lasers onto the end of each wing. And that's basically the X-wing completed. So looking back, I think these wings might be a bit too short. So if I do this again, what I would do is glue the wooden dowels to the side of the ship first, and then glue the folded V into the gap between the dowels. I think that would give just enough length on the wings to make the difference and to make them look a lot better. For the base of this one, I used a poker chip. Just so happens that last year I acquired a lot of poker chips for a very good price, and I'll be looking for lots of ways to use those. I've got a few lined up already that I'm intending to add to the channel. But also at the end of this video, I will discuss a couple of other options for bases, depending on what you're going to use the ships for. And as for the stand, my original idea was to use just another piece of wooden dowel again. Once I put the whole thing together, though, I quickly realized that that was far too tall. That just didn't look right at all. And it was then I was struck by a moment of inspiration. Looking around, I realized that the section of peg that was cut off right at the very start, not only is it the perfect height for the ship from the base, but also looking at the angles that are cut into the peg, this could be placed on the base with a very dynamic look. And when you look at the bottom of the ship, there is that groove that's already been cut into the peg, which fits nicely into the stand and allows just that little extra surface room and support when it's all glued together. So we're just going to hot glue that stand onto the base, and here we're just going to have a look at the ship and see which of these surfaces is the smoothest, which is the one we want to be the top. We want a blob of hot glue here, and then we are just going to stick that pointy corner into the groove that's already there. Just hold that in place for a few seconds while it dries, and as you can see, that's it done, really. So just remove any little bits of hot glue that are hanging around, and then we're ready to start painting. So when it comes to paint, I'm just as stingy. This bottle was about £1 from Hobbycraft. It's just a craft paint. It's slightly off-white, so in this case it actually works quite well with the look we're going for. With the original Star Wars trilogy, you've got that kind of old, grimy, worn, used look to everything, so I did have to give these a second coat of that white. Even by my standards, that first coat just wasn't quite good enough. But yeah, that's not too bad at all, I think. So now it's just time to paint some of the details. We're going to paint the base black. We will do the cockpit screen black. The inlets here for the engines. I could have sworn that the guns were also black, but maybe that's just the 80s toys that I had. So originally I'd intended not to put an astromech into the ships because I wasn't sure quite how I was going to do it. And then as I was painting, I noticed that the round end on the paintbrush here is pretty much perfect scale for an astromech droid. And I had to decide whether I was actually going to cut the end off my paintbrush or not, and was thinking no, but then I thought this is too good an opportunity not to take up, and if this isn't what this channel's all about, then I don't know what is. Pro tip, if you are going to do this, then I would highly recommend that you paint the end of the paintbrush before you cut it off. Because as you can see here, this little thing is a right nightmare to try and paint and hold on to and glue with any kind of accuracy. So having wrestled with my morals about whether or not to destroy one of my very precious and limited paintbrushes in order to make what's effectively just a tiny lump, and then instantly regretting having done so, I decided to do the same thing again. Only this time I thought if I use a blue paintbrush and then draw the silver details on whilst it's still attached, then I won't have to try and hold it in my sausage fingers whilst I try and paint details onto it. And just so you know, I did try to use those tweezers with the original orange one, and I don't know where that went. I heard it land somewhere in the kitchen. So it certainly doesn't look like anything right now, but if we keep an open mind, who knows? And who knows, if this channel works out, I might even buy a phone that has a camera. Still doesn't look like much, if I'm honest, again, but I'm hoping once it's on there, it's going to be passable enough. So when I said at the start of this build that the hardest part is going to be sawing the end off the peg, I was woefully incorrect. So I have skipped most of me trying to glue the astromech head onto the back of the X-Wing in order to avoid triggering anyone. It was one of the most frustrating things I have ever done. I cannot believe just how difficult that was. And it's difficult to even try and describe what went wrong. Just imagine Homer Simpson, and that's a good starting point. Nevertheless, once it's on, I think it does actually look quite good. So it was at this point that I was struck with yet another epiphany when I saw this blob of solidified hot glue that had dripped from the hot glue gun, and realised that this is yet another perfect little dome, and in the perfect scale for another astromech. Am I disappointed that I destroyed 2 paintbrushes? Definitely. But am I also over the moon that I've come up with a cheap and easy, basically infinite astromech heads? Definitely. So we're just going to colour this in the same way that we did the blue paintbrush. And while I've got the silver to hand, I'm just going to outline the cockpit edges just to neaten that up a little bit. So this time for the hot glue astromech, I've decided I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I have already cut the head off, and I'm now going to apply the glue straight to the X-Wing and just put the head onto that. And as you can see, this way does work a lot better, a lot easier and less messy. And once it's glued on, you can then just paint on or colour on the details of the astromech's head. So in my box of pens, I've just come across this wooden stick, which I believe is from a lollipop, but I know you can also get very similar things from arts and crafts shops very cheaply. This would have definitely been a better looking option for the engines than the grooves on the dowels that I've got, and if I did this again, I would probably use these instead. It does mean the extra time and effort of having to cut the dowels down, but then you don't have the grooves, so it's a bit of give and take as to which option you would prefer. So as for the red detailing, I did have a practice on one of the ships before I started live drawing on the other and mess it up in front of everybody. The design of the wings here is pretty simple to do, and then just quickly added some details to the astromech's head. So I know the boosters are supposed to be pink, but unfortunately my old cheap pink paint had dried up, so in that case it is back to Sharpies again, and I don't have a pink, so in case it's going to be purple. So that's them basically done. They are very rough, they're done very quickly, they can be made a lot neater. These clothes pegs were very old, so you can see here in the picture there is quite a lot of wear and tear on them already. But as far as cheap and easy goes, I think they fit the bill. They do for me. And before I finish the video, I'm just going to show you a few options that you could use for alternate bases, depending on what kind of game it is you want to play. The game X-Wing, I've never played it myself, but they seem to use a square base with an X on. So as you can see here, that could quite easily be done just using a piece of black card. And then instead of using the poker chip base, stick it straight onto that. My intention with these is to have a X-Wing style dogfighting game, but using the Gaslands rules, which I already have and I'm familiar with. I like to base all of my Gaslands vehicles on a base of 4 by 8 centimeters. So here I'm just going to do the same with the X-Wings. And for that, I'm going to use this sheet of clear plastic that was part of the packaging of one of the kids' Christmas presents. So again, just making sure you've got the straight edge to start with, cutting a strip 4 centimeters wide and then cutting that into 8 centimeter lengths. Like I say, I use it for all of my Gaslands vehicles just to make it easier to know where corners are and make sure all the vehicles are traveling at the same speed. Just makes it a little bit more fair when I'm racing the Batmobile against Mr. Bean's Mini. So I'm going to make some more and mount them properly on these bases, but that's basically how the bases would work for that. For anybody who's not familiar with the Gaslands rules, this is just a quick demonstration to show how and why it's important to have uniform templates and know exactly how far your vehicles are moving. All I need to do now is come up with some cheap and easy TIE fighters and share those with you all as soon as I do. possibly even just do a battle report to see how the whole thing pans out.
So this video has gone on a lot longer than I expected it to. In future we'll be keeping them a lot shorter. If you've watched until this point, then thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. I hope I've given you some inspiration, some ideas that you can use yourself, your own cheap and easy war games. If you've got any suggestions, please add them to the comments. Anyone that would like and subscribe would be a massive help. I would appreciate that very much. Thank you. Lots of ideas. I've been doing cheap and easy for a long time, so hopefully I'm going to be able to share all of those with everyone. Happy wargaming.